Thank you. It is a pleasure to be back here. I do love what y'all are doing down here, and it's quite an honor to be part of it. So I've been asked to cover some broad themes at lunch today to help tie the morning and the afternoon together around ag tech and big data and industry clusters. So really, how are we going to grow this region's economy moving forward? What are some of the opportunities and challenges? I think we're all very clearly aware of one of the biggest challenges of all, which is just water and climate change and everything around it. But it's even more complex than we tend to think. I particularly love this map that was done by a combination of UC Davis with the California Energy Commission's Climate Center, where they're really looking at the vulnerability of our landscape for 4 indices put together: climate, land use, socioeconomic, and our crop vulnerability. And this is really how we have to start looking at these, because they're not standalone issues that can get solved with standalone solutions. And it's even more complex than that. Really what we're talking about when we talk about ag is a much broader issue around food security. We all love to eat at least 2 or 3 times a day, and we need to eat at least 2 or 3 times a day. But that food security relies on several factors. It's your resources themselves, it's the infrastructure that allows us to plant and grow and harvest and transport. It's also things in the consumption realm of food safety, affordability, nutrition. All of these are challenges that have to be considered when we're looking at the whole system. But as we do, we've got a couple big issues really specific to today's topic. And one of those is actually a shrinking farm labor pool. I know a lot of folks out there love to think that we don't have access to farm workers because we've tightened up the border, we've made it hard for farm workers to be here. You know, the reality is people are leaving this state. They're going south. They're not coming north. The other reality is when you interview and survey young people in Mexico, they have no interest in being farm workers as their career, as their future. And why should they? They want a better life just the same way we do. And increasingly, they're looking at their own opportunities in Mexico to grow their economy. And it isn't necessarily agriculture. So this fact alone means we have got to find these technological solutions, new processes, new crops, new technologies to help us grow and harvest and manage them. But as we do that, increasingly, finding the people that can handle that increasingly complex form of agricultural production is a challenge. It's thrilling to be part of the West Hills family down here, who I would say is really taking some amazing leadership on this whole issue. When you look at their Farm of the Future, which you're going to see this afternoon, and I'm so bummed I don't get to go with you, but I have been there. It's an amazing tour. Let me urge you all to go. It's a really amazing tour. But you also look in their publications about the type of programs and certificates and really clearly identifying where the career opportunities and needs of the industry are, really showing some strong leadership. And this is something we've got to do throughout the entire system. I was at a meeting in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, put on by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy concerning the agricultural workforce. And one of the statistics they shared that I'd seen before, and it still concerns me greatly, we have over 58,000 jobs, new jobs, every year in the agricultural sector. Good paying, great jobs, skilled jobs. And we're only producing 35,000 graduates with that skill set. There is a huge gap of over 20,000 there. And California probably feels that more than most of the country because of how complex and how advanced and specialty crops our state does have. So as we look at that and move forward, we've got to try to find new ways to move this. New technologies, I mentioned that when I was introducing the luncheon panel. New technologies, new processes, et cetera, and we're getting there. You've heard mention already a couple times today about the Apps for Ag hackathons. And I'm not going to go into detail of that because I know Gabe is going to go into a little more detail, but this has really been a phenomenal project that was kicked off here at West Hills and has now had 4 of them. And we're looking at where the 5th one would be. Right now, we may have to actually look at 5 and 6 because both UC Riverside and UC Merced would love to be hosts. And I think both of them would be excellent hosts for future ones. And not just them, but working with their community colleges. It's a great network. Just at UC Cooperative Extension, we do a lot of innovation and a lot of new technology. This is one that we're particularly thrilled with right now, our crop manage system. It's a software system around precision ag that has already been proven in some field crops to reduce nitrogen as much as 40% and water by almost half. That is huge, and as we start moving forward with that and getting it implemented further, the savings and the benefits of that are just going to accrue ever more. We also are really thrilled to see here in the Valley, UC Merced was named as the leading entity to manage all of UC's droned and unmanned aerial vehicles work. The Mesa Lab over at UC Merced, they're doing a fantastic job. We're really thrilled to work with them. Drones have a lot of possibility moving forward into the future. And in addition to that, and I have a missing picture, oh well, just several examples here. I'm not going to go into details on these, but just several examples to show you some of the breadth and the diversity of innovations and entrepreneurial new startups that are coming out of the UC system and UC partnering with others for innovation. In particular, the one at the bottom, QB3, which is San Francisco, Berkeley, and Santa Cruz joined together around the life sciences. We're now working extremely closely with them to create that same sort of support system for innovation and entrepreneurship statewide to support agriculture, natural resources, and rural communities. So they have access to the type of support system to pursue innovation, startups, commercialization. A perfect example of how we've been doing this for quite some time, and it really gets back to having that infrastructure out there from the land grant university. You know, the land grant was started here in California in 1868. We were actually one of the first states to jump on the relatively newly signed Morrill Act that President Lincoln signed. Quickly thereafter, down in Riverside, they kicked off an agricultural experiment station, which is other legislation from the 1880s that provides us state formula funds for both ag experiment station as well as cooperative extension. But you can see this is just an example. We're actually going to have a lot more of these. I've commissioned my communications shop to make me at least 30 of these. Each of them will be on a completely different crop or activity from every portion of the state, because messaging to the public is something I'm going to spend a little time on later here more, but it's key to people understand what's going on. And here you can see Tango Mandarin was just a patent that was an innovation of new cultivar patented not that long ago, about 2007. And it has just taken off like crazy. Consumption has doubled, increases in value, acreage planted, everything. But as that's been happening down below, you can see all the challenges. Asian citrusillid, Huang Long Bing, and it does take practice to say that quickly. It took me a while to get my tongue wrapped around that one. Asian citrus greening, you can call it too. And then solutions we're trying to find, parasitic wasp, and now even more exciting, this interactive detection map utilizing citizens to help us keep this disease from expanding further. And this is huge. In fact, it's part of an overall effort that we're trying to do to leverage our system. And we've got a pretty amazing system. I've been in this job for about a year now, and in my position, I have to travel a lot to other states to be at national and regional meetings concerning ag experiment station, cooperative extension, the land grant universities, et cetera. And I dare say there is no other state that has the kind of system we do. For one thing, we are the only state that has, as a requirement for our cooperative extension advisors in the field, that they have a robust research program. In every other state, the advisors in the field are simply taking knowledge handed to them from campus and then sharing it. They're teaching their extension. They're not doing their own research. And I think the fact that here in California, people in our county offices and at our research extension centers are working daily, hand in glove with our growers on joint research projects is part of why we do find solutions so rapidly and so well. But, a little bad news. This is a challenge for us, and you're going to be hearing more about this in the next few years as we start trying to develop some capital campaign and some funding. One of the things that has driven me absolutely crazy up and down the state, and not just the University of California, but CSU, our community colleges, basically ag research in general, is 40 to 50 years of deferred maintenance and constant downslope of funding and personnel. And it's a national problem. It's not just a California problem. And you can see the effects. If you look at that top line there, the blue dollars, that's U.S. investment in agricultural research going down over the last several centuries, or decades, centuries. At the same time, you can see China's investment. China is really upping their game, and particularly recently. And guess what? Look down below what happens. Our productivity of our ag sector is at best a little up. It's relatively flat when you compare it to what's going on in China. This is huge because, as you've heard other people mention today, we're competing with these people. And if we're not getting the newest cultivars, the best ways to produce our food, the best ways to package it and store it, and everything else that goes around our food system, we are going to lose out in a global economy. Part of the answer to that, and I have to show this slide every single time I talk, because, in my opinion, way too many people in this state don't have a clue how agriculture fits into the state's economy. I say that for two reasons. One is, when we had the very first state economic summit in San Jose in 2012, 500 of the best and brightest people from the economic development world, the state legislature, local state government, a host of people, best and brightest, 500 people, whole day. At the end of the day, you would have thought the state's economy was living on a barren asteroid in outer space. No, not the word soil was not mentioned once. Nothing about natural resources, agriculture, anything. Teeny little bit of discussion about who gets what water, but not even much of that, quite frankly. In a conversation, a day-long conversation about the state's economy. How can that be? So myself and several other people took it upon ourselves in 2013 to go to every single one of the regional forums, 16 of them, and lobby hard for the State Economic Summit to charter a brand new action team on working landscapes, which they did. We're now one of the 7 officially chartered action teams. And we purposefully said working landscapes and captured all of that you see defined there because forest fisheries, they didn't have a voice there either. And frankly, forest, fisheries, ag, mining, watersheds, rural recreation, we're all in it together. And when you look at regions, we are really all in it together, and we need to start working together. Plus, it makes for really big numbers. I love those numbers. And I could not get those from the classic economics folks. I went to the California Community Colleges Center for Excellence, who does a lot of work on looking at industry trends and jobs using NAICS codes, because they're trying to see what's happening in industries and jobs so that they can develop their curriculum to stay ahead of it. And I said, listen, what's the numbers for working landscapes? Nobody will give me a number, other than that number that drives me absolutely crazy. And I'm ashamed to say I've heard too many University of California professors say this. Agriculture is less than 2% of the state's GDP, so why do we even worry about it? Why do we even bother having ag in this state? How many people have heard that statement? Yeah, that's what I thought. It's pervasive. It's out there far too pervasively. Drives me nuts. I'm ready to throw the next person that says it through a window or something. What those people are doing is they're taking the raw farm gate value of about $50 billion, which is just a little under 2%, or at least a couple years ago, that was a little under 2%. They're completely ignoring everything else around ag. The farm to fork, the inputs, the activity, the labor, everything. Not to mention the granddaddy of it all that none of us have a good number for, which is ecosystem services, which is probably far, far greater than direct sales. Having said that, the Community Colleges Center for Excellence came up with a $318 billion in direct sales in 2012. And I can tell you from having studied that report thoroughly, they didn't really include recreation. There's virtually nothing in there from recreation, which is a gigantic number. Even without that, that's a gigantic number, and a lot of jobs and a lot of potential new jobs. And you throw a multiplier, a conservative multiplier on that, which everybody loves to do. I feel very comfortable saying working landscapes are at a minimum at least 1/3 of this state's economy. And quite frankly, we're working on getting updated numbers, and this time we're pulling together the community colleges, the UC Agricultural Issues Center, plus some of the consultants that a lot of ag commissioners have been using in their individual counties to try to get a value for ag. We're throwing all those people around a table and making them agree on methodology, which will probably be one heck of a fight. Yeah, but methodology, and then once they agree on that, numbers, because Karen Ross, myself, a lot of you, a lot of people, I want to know exactly what that number is beyond the shadow of a doubt that nobody can argue with. I think when I have that new number with, say, 2015 data, I'm going to be very surprised if it doesn't show that working landscapes are at least half the state's economy. I will be very surprised. And that is important to get people on board with what we're trying to do. Now, you heard Ag Plus mentioned by Karen this morning. Huge opportunity to put into action some of that I just mentioned. 4 regions coming together, really targeting economic opportunity and jobs in the farm to fork realm. And we're talking huge opportunity. Tens of thousands of jobs, millions, tens of millions of dollars of activity. And what's exciting about this, it was recognized and designated by the White House just last fall as one of the regional manufacturing hubs nationally to get a lot of assistance and support from the federal government. Plus, those regions are doing amazing stuff working together, and it's a comprehensive plan that, frankly, other regions are already plagiarizing right and left, and I encourage them to do that because it takes into account all the pieces you need. Remember that stovepiping we were talking about earlier? It doesn't work in economic development either. In a region that's looking at farm to fork, you've got to look at the infrastructure, the trained workforce, the access to capital, the research and development, all the pieces, the supply chains, all of those have to be considered, solutions found, strategies made, and forward motion together. One of the things we're doing to help with that, because a lot of it's science, when we get into farm to fork, that job shortage is really going to hit hard in things like food processing. Laboratory technicians are huge. It's just anything related to that. We're trying to get folks in the urban and suburban and not directly ag public to get much more engaged in science. Because a whole lot of what drives some of the regulations that folks feel aren't based on science is that we have a largely scientifically illiterate population. We really do. And oh, by the way, that scientifically illiterate population is at both ends of the spectrum. Farmers denying climate change are no better than lefty liberals denying vaccines and GMOs. It's all a lack of understanding science and understanding what science brings to you. And we've got to start looking at it that way. So we're actually focusing our 4-H programs, our California Naturalists and others to try to get citizens more engaged, get them training, get them into the kind of science they can feel comfortable with and enjoy. This is also tied to what UC as a whole is trying to do around innovation, because really a lot of innovation comes out of science and research. Innovation, entrepreneurship. Janet Napolitano, our current president, has kicked off this innovation initiative across the entire UC. And it's been such a great program that just recently the governor signed a bill from the state legislature for $22 million to support this. Now you remember my whining a little while ago about nobody knows about ag? It's true, they don't know about ag and innovation either. So agriculture, natural resources were explicitly excluded from receiving those $22 million. They go only to the 10 campuses. And it drives me nuts because I look at our stats. My division, Ag and Natural Resources, the Ag Experiment Stations, Cooperative Extension, all of us, we are less than 1% of the entire UC budget, 0.7% to be exact. And yet, we typically file 4% of the patents. And we don't just file them, we move them forward. If you look every year at the report that UC puts out on patent revenue, all those items I've highlighted in yellow there are from Ag and Natural Resources. These are the top patent revenues at the UC. I know that our division just in the last decade has produced over $40 million in patent revenue for the University of California. And do you know how much we and our campus partners get back from that? Yeah, it goes into a black hole to keep doing biomedical in Silicon Valley and all that sexy, cool stuff that clearly Ag is not. But we're working on that. These kind of numbers help. But part of it is we got to understand what all is engaged and where the opportunities are. I'd love to show this slide because if you look at that farm value chain there, inputs, growing it, production, processing, et cetera, there's a lot of opportunity just in efficiencies and new startups along it. But look at the industry clusters it touches. Technology, renewable energy, manufacturing, goods movement. All of those are opportunities for the ag sector to be finding improvements and innovations and entrepreneurial opportunities and making just the whole system work better, plus creating a lot of new businesses and jobs. I say that a lot, but it's important. We got to start thinking, too, about some creative new things to do. I love this slide, but I had this slide from 2 years ago, but I've thrown it back into my slide deck because of a phone call I got about 2 months ago from the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, which is a county, it's a county and about 80 of their cities. It's really a regional economic development corp. They wanted to meet with me, and they were kind of coy about what. So I get there, and they tell me Los Angeles has decided they are going to be the world leader in vertical farming and controlled environment agriculture. And they're going to leverage their aerospace industry, which is very strong down there, to push this forward. I'm thinking, wow. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of opportunity around this just for food. And when you've got big cities with a lot of empty warehouses and manufacturing facilities, these folks in Japan are making money hand over fist. They're loving it. Plus, you don't have to worry about food safety when you're growing food this way. Now, it's not cost effective for a lot of crops, but for specialty stuff, it is. Although I will say, you heard Mark Linder this morning mention that I spoke at his culinary folks up in Napa a couple weeks ago, and I was mentioning the fact that low potassium lettuce doesn't taste bitter because it doesn't have as much potassium in it, and the kids love it. Oh my God, 2 or 3 chefs in the audience just jumped down my throat. Oh, that's just not natural. Rawr, rawr, rawr. And I said, guess what? Our children are eating candy and junk food. I don't care if this isn't 100% grown in the ground, in the dirt, natural. If they're eating something green like lettuce instead of a candy bar, I think we should all be thrilled. And that's an important point because all too often as we move forward with some of this, our foodies are one of our biggest roadblocks. And that too is something that's got to be taken into consideration. Related to that, a lot of new tools. It's around partnering. This is a fun thing we're working out of the region to the north of you up here, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. They've done this rural-urban connection strategy that, I'm pleased to say, we're getting very close to moving down into this area, and you're going to love it. It is an amazing piece of computer modeling tool. It takes geographic information systems layers and adds econometric modeling so you can do what-if analysis and actually real-time decision-making around things like water management, return on investment, trucking, transportation corridors, putting the business plan for a new processing facility together to take to the banker. It's really a wonderful tool. And now we've got a lot of new partners, particularly the national labs on board, which is very exciting. We've recently joined the University Economic Development Association, along with UC Merced and UC San Diego, and Metropolitano has approved all of us joining this. Quite a few community colleges and CSUs in the state are very, very active with this. This is a great resource to let us find new ways to harness the power of higher education for economic development. Along with that, universities have long played a key role as a boundary organization. When you think about all the farmers that are in those various commodity groups there, they often don't like to share their data with each other. They're a little afraid if the neighbor knows what they're doing, you know, maybe they're going to make more money than me, maybe they're going to plant something I was planning to plant. Yeah, Dawn's saying, yeah, it's that way. So what they've been doing for decades, literally, is utilizing our agricultural research facilities and programs to take that information, do the analysis and the strategy development, and get it back out for the entire public to use, and yet still keep their secrets. This is something increasingly we're going to be doing as we look at startups and regional industry clusters. It's a very, very important tool to have that kind of black box that lets everybody collaborate on research and yet keep your proprietary info safe. What it really comes down to, though, as we move forward and we try to find a solution, is figuring out what are the different pieces we're looking at. That's why I'm so thrilled with that Ag Plus strategy, that they really are being comprehensive. But as we look at technologies, we look how to support it, how to support innovation, entrepreneurship, how to facilitate getting infrastructure down here, all of it, we've got to get people to take the blinders off. And in closing, I think we've got to also understand that data is changing. Just taking the blinders off is not enough. You need to understand that analysis itself is changing. We're rapidly moving into extremely complex modeling systems related to ag and natural resources. It's going to provide us a lot of wonderful information, but it also requires some high quality data that isn't always available right now, which brings me to data. People love to talk about big data and everything it's going to bring to us, but the reality is there's a lot of different type of data out there. Big data, open data. Open data sometimes tends to not be the highest quality. In fact, that RUC system I showed you a while ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we fought like heck to get them access to USDA data, and as soon as they got it and looked at it, they're like, we can't use this. It's really poor quality. It's self-reported, it's at best 80% accurate, it's not high resolution, it's not frequently refreshed. We can't even use this, we don't even want it. And unfortunately, a lot of the data that's sitting in our government agencies is of that caliber, and it's a huge problem. That data is going to be of some use, but not as much initially as some people think. And some data is proprietary. We've got other challenges, and this is really crucial as we move forward on technology. I mentioned that innovation system we're trying to do. We're trying to bring together existing incubators, the UC, CSU, community college system, private sector, public, finance, state, federal government, all the players out there to jointly catalyze a support system on innovation and entrepreneurship targeting ag, natural resources, and rural. Because one of my pet peeves is reinventing the wheel, which we do all too often, and we waste bazillions of dollars reinventing the wheel on so many levels. Misplaced priorities, duplicating efforts, lack of support. That RUX model, many of us have known for several years it was an amazing thing, and yet we can't get our state government to quit trying to reinvent it. They've spent millions to date trying to reinvent it to no avail, and we could have had it out and running. Turf battles, perfect example. My last slide, because I think this is really what all of that sums up to, the not reinventing, the getting past the turf battles, is really the power of synergy. Collaborating, leveraging each other's resources, sharing information, creating partnerships moving forward. These are just a few, a tiny fraction of the many partners we're trying to work with out and around the state. And as we leave here today, and as you all move forward with the group here locally and each other, I really urge you to look at synergy and how we can really use that. First of all, you got to love the definition. It's just simply working together. So with that, I'm going to close out and say I look forward to working with you moving forward. Thank you.